All right, let's get right into it. Today on The Explainer, we're setting up what might just be the ultimate hypothetical matchup in the entire Grim Shadows universe. On one side, you have the DEEPKIN, these absolutely unyielding, heavily armored dwarves of the deep. And on the other, the TYRANTBORN, the Dark Elves of Tel'Zarath, who are basically a race of cruel, lightning-fast mage warriors. We're taking the lore straight from the source material and just smashing these two subterranean superpowers together. Picture this for a second. You're trapped miles underground. Who is actually going to survive an all-out, no-holds-barred subterranean war? Now, we're not just picking favorites here. We're going to dive into a completely objective, tactical analysis of their distinct arsenals, their cultures, and their core combat doctrines. We are literally putting flesh up against stone and magic up against engineering to see who truly rules the deep. So here is our fight card for today. We'll start by setting the battlefield with the war below Tanalon, break down the Dark Elven Raiders and the Dwarven War Machine, then compare magic versus mountain resilience. After that, we'll analyze tactics in the tunnels, and finally crown our ultimate subterranean victor. Okay, Section 1, the war below Tanalon. Let's set the battlefield. Because to really grasp how this clash plays out, we've got to look at the environment, right? I mean, this absolutely isn't some open grassy field with sunlight and glorious cavalry charges. No way. We're talking about a sprawling, jagged underworld, literally carved out of obsidian. It's laced with ancient blood magic and bathes in this eternal blackness, where light isn't just banished, it's completely forgotten. Both of these factions navigate this incredibly harsh terrain every single day. They're fighting in choked, narrow tunnels and massive, lightless caverns lit by nothing but glowing fungi or rivers of molten rock. The terrain dictates literally every weapon they forge and every tactic they use. Moving on to Section 2, the Dark Elven Raiders, also known as the Terrors of Tel'Zarath. Now, you've got to remember, these guys are definitely not your typical woodland elves. They're slavers, hedonists, and apex predators born to dominate through fear and pain. And their whole combat philosophy, it's terrifyingly simple. Silence is power. Silence is control. When the Dark Elves charge, you aren't going to hear any war horns. They rely entirely on a fluid sign language to communicate in the middle of a battle, because to them, speaking out loud is actually seen as a weakness. Imagine just sitting in pitch blackness and your only warning is the whisper of drawn steel. Adding to that psychological horror, they ride these blind, two-legged lizard beasts that move completely silently across the stone and climb walls using hooked talons to rip into their enemies. And here's the really messed up part. They don't just want to kill you. Their entire society is built around slavery. So every single warrior carries dozens of poisons. They specifically tip their hand crossbows with paralytic venom, which is a devastating toxin designed to capture enemies alive. They fight to break you and drag you back into the depths. Their weapons are insanely insidious, heavily focused on biological warfare and inflicting maximum agony. So naturally, their arsenal is totally built for that agony. We're talking jagged obsidian blades and barbed whips. But the real nightmare? These guys are 6-foot-tall mage warriors. They don't separate a blade strike from a spell cast. They use blood magic to heal themselves by draining the pain of their enemies, void magic to literally tear space, shadow magic for absolute stealth, and abyssal magic to just unravel flesh. They are lean, muscular, and impossibly fast. All right, Section 3, the Dwarven War Machine, or as I like to call them, the immovable object. So what actually happens when all that elven speed slams into a literal immovable object? Well, the DEEPKIN dwarves are absolute masters of stone and steel. We're talking about a people bound by unbreakable oaths and just relentless discipline. And to counter the elves' light venom-tipped weapons, they bring heavy siege tech right into the tunnels. I'm talking about the Breath of Deephold. Guys, this is literally a shoulder-mounted magma thrower. The dwarves aren't messing around with poisons. They rely on advanced, brutal engineering to bring molten death to the tight confines of the underground. I mean, the sheer weight of their military might is just staggering. Their vanguard is out there swinging forge-cutter axes designed to bite right through enchanted armor. They swing thunder hammers, these rune-etched weapons that unleash devastating sonic bursts. And defensively, oh, they are wrapped in goddamn golem plate. This is semi-sentient armor that actually anticipates incoming blows. Plus, they carry heavy rune shields to deflect spells and wear smoke helms that filter out toxins and enhance their dark vision. They are practically walking tanks, custom-built to survive choked, lightless tunnels.
Which brings us to Section 4, Magic versus Mountain Resilience. This is the statistical turning point.
So how exactly does the terrifying sorcery of the Dark Elves hold up against Dwarven fortitude? Well, because the Dwarves are literally born from the heart of the world itself, imbued with the breath of the earth, they have this massive innate resistance to magic. Bottom line, 50% of all spells cast against a dwarf will just flat out fail. 50%. Seriously, let that number sink in for a second. That is a massive tactical advantage. Remember, the Dark Elves are mage warriors, right? Their entire combat flow relies on weaving blood and void magic in tandem with their strikes. But against the Deepkin, half of that mystical arsenal just fizzles out the second it hits dwarven stone and runic armor. The playing field is instantly leveled.
Okay, Section 5, Tactics in the Tunnels. Let's look at the matchup.
When you actually pit these two distinct combat philosophies directly against each other, the contrast is just wild. The Dark Elves favor these fluid, lightning-fast hit-and-run raids from the shadows to disorient and paralyze. But the Dwarves? They form completely impenetrable shield walls. They advance with this unbreakable, oath-bound resolve. The Elves want a chaotic skirmish. The Dwarves just force a grinding, relentless wall of death.
Let's break this down like a sports analyst looking at a draft matrix. On offense, that elven paralytic venom is brilliantly effective on exposed flesh, sure, but the dwarves are entirely encased in God-Dawn golem plate, and they wear smoke helms that filter out toxins. Meanwhile, a dwarven magma thrower completely negates void silk armor. Under defense, the elves are using shadows and speed to avoid getting hit, but the dwarves just rely on sheer, unyielding armor. And magic and tech? The Dark Elves' blood sorcery is terrifying, but it meets an absolute brick wall against dwarven rune shields and that innate 50% magic resistance. Dwarven engineering basically perfectly counters the biological and magical threats of the Tyrantborn.
And finally, Section 6, the ultimate subterranean victor, the verdict. So, based strictly on the lore of the Grim Shadows universe, this brutal war of attrition really boils down to one massive counter. The Dark Elves rely on absolute silence as their greatest psychological weapon. It breeds terror and maintains their stealth. But the Dwarves? They wield thunder hammers. These weapons unleash massive sonic bursts that literally shatter the silence. The Dwarves don't even need to see you in the pitch black if they can just collapse the entire tunnel around you, or send out a concussive shockwave that shatters bone. The Dwarven war machine systematically dismantles the Dark Elves' whole reliance on stealth and magic.
So I'll leave you with this final thought today. In a grueling war of attrition, where magic fails half the time, where venom can't even scratch golem plate, and where the darkest silence is shattered by sonic hammers, can flesh ever truly break stone? The Deepkin are for sure an absolute nightmare for the raiders of Talzarath. If you want to dig deeper into this incredible lore, the Grim Shadows universe has so much more waiting for you. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer.